If you've ever felt that strange mixture of curiosity and confusion, the kind that makes you lean forward, eyes half open, wondering what in the world is about to happen, then congratulations. You're already in the perfect mindset to meet Loki. Because Loki is not a simple story. Loki is a slow-burning fire, a mysterious whisper in the shadows of ancient halls, a puzzle with missing pieces, and still somehow the most entertaining character in all of Norse mythology. Imagine the world before the Vikings sailed, before the sagas were carved into history, before anyone even dared ask, who is the Trickster god? In that vast silence, a single name echoed through the 9 realms, not shouted, not sung, but laughed, whispered, and sometimes groaned in frustration. Loki, the god who could charm his way into any feast, the god who could slip out of any punishment. For a while, the god who caused disasters so huge that even he sometimes said, oops. But before the chaos, before the pranks, before the world serpent child and the 8-legged horse baby, yes, that happened. There was simply a story beginning, a quiet one, a slow one, the kind of story you slide into like sinking into a warm blanket, except the blanket is slightly on fire, and you're not sure if Loki set it that way on purpose. So let's step gently, very gently, into the world of Norse mythology. Let the longboats rest, let the waves calm, let the northern sky shimmer, because we're moving at a slow, sleepy pace, guided by the soft footsteps of a god who never walks in a straight line. Who is Loki? A liar, a hero, a villain, a mother, a father, a friend, an enemy, or all of them at once? The real answer is simple. Loki is Loki, and that's what makes his story worth telling and worth staying awake for just a little longer, or maybe drifting off right now. And remember, like and subscribe, and let me know from where you're watching from. Before Loki ever pulled his first prank, before he ever shapeshifted into anything weird or questionable, before he made the gods groan in despair or laugh in disbelief, he already had a reputation. Not a title, not a crown, not a mighty hammer or shining spear. No. Loki had something far more dangerous and far more chaotic, the art of trickery. Picture the grand halls of Asgard, golden pillars, shining floors, long tables, overflowing with roasted boar and honeyed mead. The gods are talking, bragging, telling heroic stories, and somewhere in that bright room, at the far end of the feast, is Loki. Not the loudest, not the strongest, not the tallest, but absolutely, without question, the most unpredictable. Where Thor used strength, Loki used wit. Where Odin used wisdom, Loki used imagination. Where everyone else followed rules, Loki read the rules, laughed at them, hid them under a cushion, and pretended he had never seen them before. But here's the strange thing. The gods needed him. Asgard, for all its power, was full of problems. Giants attacking, walls collapsing, treasures disappearing, curses drifting around like smoke. And while Loki caused half of these problems, he also solved half of them. Sometimes by accident, sometimes on purpose, sometimes because he had no choice after the mess he made. In a world of warriors and kings, the Trickster filled a role no one else could. He was the spark in the darkness, the unexpected twist, the quiet whisper of chaos that made life interesting. Without Loki, the sagas would be straightforward, predictable, and honestly, a little boring. And deep down, though they would never admit it, the gods enjoyed Loki's company. His jokes, his stories, his cleverness, the way he could turn a hopeless situation into something workable. He was the friend who annoyed you, frustrated you, confused you, but somehow always kept things alive. Loki wasn't a hero. He wasn't a villain. He was the trickster, the god who danced between shadows and fire, between lies and truth, between chaos and charm. And the 9 realms would never be the same because of him. If Loki's personality is confusing, his origins are even more confusing. So confusing that even the ancient storytellers said, yeah, we're not totally sure about this guy. And honestly, that's perfect. A trickster god should have a backstory that feels like smoke slipping through your fingers. Let's start where we can. Loki was born in Jotunheim, the land of the giants. His father was Farbodi, whose name basically means cruel striker, which already explains a lot. His mother was Laufey, whose name means leafy, suggesting she was gentle, or small, or simply the kind of person you'd underestimate, which also explains a lot. So Loki was half giant, half mysterious, and entirely unpredictable. But here's the strange part. Despite being a giant by birth, he didn't grow up with them. Instead, through reasons never fully explained, because Norse mythology sometimes gives you a story and sometimes gives you a shrug. Loki somehow wandered into the world of the gods. Maybe he impressed them. Maybe he tricked them. Maybe he just refused to leave until someone said, fine, let him stay. Whatever happened, Loki ended up in Asgard, sharing meals with gods who were shaped from lightning, glory, and destiny. And there he was, sly, smiling, sharp-tongued Loki, eating beside them as if he'd always belonged. But that only raises more questions. Why did Odin trust him? Why did the Aesir accept him? Why did they let someone so unpredictable, so confusing, so Loki, into their golden city? Some say Odin saw potential in him. Others say Odin saw danger and wanted that danger close. And some whisper that Loki was simply destined to stand among the gods as their ally, their problem, or their undoing. Loki's origins remain a foggy path full of half-truths, mysteries, and shadowy hints. But one thing is clear. He came from outside Asgard, and he brought with him a spark of wild chaos that would change the 9 realms forever. To understand Loki, you must understand the strangest, most unexpected bond in all of Norse mythology. The bond between Loki and Odin, the Allfather. Not allies, not friends, not acquaintances, but something far deeper, far older, and far more complicated. They were blood brothers. Yes, Odin, the king of the gods, the wise wanderer, the one-eyed seeker of cosmic truth, once stood before Loki, cut his hand, and pressed it to Loki's open wound. Their blood mixed, their oath sealed, and their fates tied together until the end of the 9 realms. Why? That is the great question. Some say Odin saw in Loki a spark of intelligence unlike anything in Asgard. Some say Odin needed Loki's cleverness to balance Thor's strength and Frey's magic. And some quietly whisper that Odin simply admired Loki's fearlessness, the fearless way he laughed at danger, mocked the impossible, and treated life like a game he intended to win. Whatever the reason, the oath was sworn. And in the strict, ancient laws of the Norse gods, this was no small promise. Blood brothers were bound to assist one another, defend one another, and most importantly, never abandon one another. Which explains why Loki stayed in Asgard even when he caused terrible problems, and why Odin tolerated him long after the others lost patience, and why, in the deepest halls of myth, Loki's story runs parallel to Odin's like 2 rivers that sometimes flow together, and sometimes crash violently apart. Their relationship was a balance of brilliance and disaster. Odin, the seeker of wisdom. Loki, the creator of chaos. Together they formed a strange harmony, order and disorder dancing side by side. And perhaps Odin believed that even chaos had its place in the grand design of the universe. After all, without unpredictability, there is no growth. Without trickery, there is no surprise. Without Loki, many of the gods' greatest victories would never have happened. But the oath also meant that when Loki eventually crossed the line, when his tricks turned into betrayal, the breaking of their brotherhood would shake the foundations of the cosmos. For now, though, they were bound, two unlikely brothers, walking the same path through the 9 realms, shaping history with every step. If you ever tried to guess what Loki looked like, you'd probably be wrong. Not because you don't know him, but because Loki doesn't stay in one shape long enough for anyone to know him. Shapeshifting wasn't just Loki's skill. It was his art, his hobby, his entertainment, and sometimes his only escape from the consequences of his own chaos. He wasn't limited to animals, or humans, or even living things. Loki could turn into anything his mischievous imagination desired. One moment, he could be a sleek falcon cutting through the wind. The next, a salmon slipping past a fisherman's hands. Then a horse, yes, a literal horse, galloping through the forest. Then an elderly woman with a voice so sweet it could make even Odin suspicious. He could be a fly buzzing on a wall, a seal diving beneath icy waves, or even a cloud of shimmering smoke drifting through cracks in stones. But the important part wasn't what he became, it was why he became it. Sometimes he transformed to escape danger, sometimes he transformed to cause danger, and sometimes he transformed because it was funny. When trouble loomed, whether it was giants, angry gods, or disasters he himself accidentally created, Loki used shapeshifting like a key to unlock the next part of the story. No door could trap him, no prison could hold him, no mistake was too big if he could simply turn into a bird and fly away. But his transformations weren't always heroic or dignified. Once, to distract a magical stallion, Loki became a mare, and later gave birth to Sleipnir, the 8. Before the world-shaking moments, before the legendary disasters, before the punishments carved into myth, there was something much smaller, the very first spark of Loki's mischief. And like most dangerous things, disguised as harmless fun, it started softly, quietly, almost adorably. At first, Loki's tricks were tiny, barely noticeable, the kind of things that made the gods look around and say, that's strange, but not strange enough to suspect him. A drinking cup disappearing from the feast table, Thor's sandals somehow tied together, Sif's braid floating mysteriously in front of her face, a playful whisper drifting through the halls. I didn't do it, or did I? These were the earliest seeds of chaos. Loki learned something important. It didn't take long for Loki to discover a powerful truth. Mischief creates reactions. Reactions create stories. And stories create attention. And if there was one thing Loki loved more than mischief, it was being noticed. When Freya spent half the morning searching for her missing necklace, which Loki quietly placed back exactly where she left it, he hid behind a pillar and giggled. When Thor stomped through Asgard, demanding to know who painted tiny wings on the sides of his hammer, Loki tried very hard not to laugh. The hammer looked adorable. When Odin rubbed his forehead and muttered, "Loki," We just started the day. Loki smiled like a child who'd been caught with cookie crumbs on his face. Harmless. For now, none of it was truly dangerous. Not yet. The gods rolled their eyes, sighed deeply, sometimes groaned. But no one was angry enough to punish him. Not yet, because Loki wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was experimenting, testing the edges of their patience, testing the limits of his own cleverness, testing the boundaries of Asgard's perfect routine. And with each little prank, Loki discovered that the smallest push could create the biggest ripple. Seeds of chaos. Every trick was like planting a seed of curiosity, a seed of possibility, a seed of future chaos. And one day, those seeds would grow into towering disasters, the kind that would alter the fate of gods and giants alike. But not now. Now Loki was simply having fun, causing tiny storms in the peaceful golden halls of Asgard. The mischief was gentle, sneaky, almost innocent. But make no mistake, this was just the beginning. In Asgard, peace is fragile, especially with Loki nearby. Sometimes, a single careless moment can spiral into chaos. This is exactly what happened with Idun's apples, the golden fruits that grant the gods eternal youth and vitality. Idun was bright, cheerful, and trusted by all. But one day, Loki, whether out of curiosity, mischief, or just plain boredom, made a choice he would later regret. A giant named Thjazi, with black feathers and cunning eyes, tricked Loki into luring him to Idun. Before anyone could react, the giant snatched her away, and the golden apples vanished. Without them, the gods began to age. Their strength waned, wrinkles appeared, and even Thor's laughter sounded weaker. Chaos rippled through Asgard. The gods demanded answers, and all eyes turned to Loki. This wasn't a prank. This was a full-blown crisis. True to his nature, Loki didn't panic or run. He planned. He transformed into a falcon, sleek, swift, and silent, and flew across mountains and forests to rescue Idun. The journey was perilous, filled with traps, storms, and the constant threat of Thjazi's wrath. Yet, with his cleverness and a bit of luck, Loki outwitted the giant and returned Idun safely. The gods regained their youth, their laughter, and their power. And though they were relieved, they never forgot who had caused the chaos. Loki smiled quietly to himself. Sometimes the trickster creates the problem. Sometimes he fixes it. Often he does both at once. One day, Asgard faced a big problem. Its walls were in danger of falling apart. Then, a mysterious builder appeared, offering to rebuild the walls, but at a shocking price: the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya herself. The gods panicked. They met in the Golden Hall, whispering and pacing, unsure how to refuse without risking their city. And naturally, they turned to Loki for a solution. Loki, clever and mischievous as always, didn't confront the builder directly. Instead, he devised a plan involving the builder's massive stallion. If the horse was distracted, the builder could not complete his work on time. Shapeshifting into a mare, Loki lured the stallion away, creating chaos in the fields. The builder, unable to finish the walls without his horse, failed his deal. Loki returned to the gods, grinning slyly. But there was an unexpected twist from this strange adventure. Loki later gave birth to Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged horse, faster and stronger than any other steed in the 9 realms. The gods shook their heads. Some were frustrated. Some were secretly impressed. Loki's chaos had saved Asgard once again, in a way that no one could have predicted. Loki's story isn't just about pranks or clever tricks. It's also about family. But his family is anything but ordinary. He had a relationship with the giantess Angrboda, whose name hints at sorrow and misfortune. Together, they had 3 children, each one strange, powerful, and terrifying. These were not children you could leave unsupervised in Asgard. These were children who could change the fate of the world just by existing. The first Fenrir was a wolf so enormous that mountains shook when he moved. The gods feared him, unsure how to control a creature so wild and strong, a perfect reflection of his father's chaotic spirit. The second, Jormungandr, was the Midgard serpent, cast into the sea to circle the world, biting his own tail. Ships rocked when he stirred, and sailors whispered tales of a shadow beneath the waves that could swallow islands. The third, Hel, became queen of the underworld. Half her face was pale and cold, the other half warm and human. She ruled over the dead with a quiet, chilling authority, a reflection of Loki's cunning and unpredictability. Loki loved his children in his own peculiar way, sometimes tender, sometimes absent, sometimes mischievously protective. They were extensions of his mischief and chaos, linking him forever to the fate of the 9 realms. These children were more than monsters. They were prophecies, reminders of Ragnarök, the end of the world. Family for Loki was never simple. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgettable, just like him. Fenrir, Loki's first child with Angrboda, was no ordinary wolf. He was enormous, powerful, and growing more fearsome each day. The gods of Asgard soon realized that this wolf could not be left free. His strength and cunning made even the bravest of gods uneasy. The gods tried to bind him with chains, but Fenrir broke every one. Ordinary iron, steel, or magic could not hold him. So they turned to the dwarves, master craftsmen of magical objects, who forged Gleipnir, a thin ribbon that seemed fragile but was made from impossible things: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the roots of a mountain, and other magical impossibilities. It was soft, smooth, and unbreakable. Convincing Fenrir to allow himself to be bound was a challenge. Suspicious, he would only agree if a god put a hand in his mouth as a pledge of trust. Brave Tyr volunteered. When Fenrir realized he could not escape, he bit off Tyr's hand in anger. The gods had succeeded in binding him, but at a terrible cost. Fenrir would remain chained, growing in patience and rage, waiting for Ragnarök, the day he would break free, swallow Odin, and unleash chaos across the realms. He stood as a reminder of the power of Loki's bloodline, and the chaos even the gods could not fully control. Though terrifying, Fenrir's story is also one of cleverness, courage, and fate, qualities Loki embodied in every mischievous, unpredictable way. Loki's second child with Angrboda was Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. From the moment he was born, it was clear he would not be ordinary. He grew so enormous that the gods cast him into the ocean surrounding Midgard, where he wrapped himself around the entire world, biting his own tail. Sailors sometimes saw his massive shadow under the waves and gasped. Some screamed, some laughed nervously, and some simply dropped their nets and ran for shore. Jormungandr's presence was subtle but terrifying. The oceans themselves seemed to respect him. Waves rose and fell without warning. Fishing boats rocked as though they were tiny toys, and the creatures of the sea scattered in fear. Fishermen whispered stories of a shadow beneath the waves that could swallow islands whole. Even the tides seemed cautious, as if they were politely asking, "Excuse me, do you mind not causing a storm today?" Though he was fearsome, Jormungandr was also cunning. He watched the world above with quiet patience, studying humans, gods, and animals alike. He learned patterns, noticed weaknesses, and waited for the perfect moment to act. His destiny, like his brother Fenris, was entwined with Ragnarök, the end of the world. When he would face Thor in a battle so massive it would shake the heavens, the seas, and the earth itself. In many ways, Jormungandr mirrored his father's nature, clever, patient, unpredictable, and dangerous. He reminded the gods that no matter how mighty they were, chaos lurked just beneath the surface. Even when unseen, his presence shaped decisions, fears, and strategies across the 9 realms. Though he lived mostly unseen beneath the waves, his shadow was everywhere. Jormungandr's story is one of inevitability, patience, and cunning, a reflection of Loki himself, the trickster whose influence stretched far beyond Asgard, reminding all who lived in the 9 realms that order is only ever temporary. Loki's third child with Angerboda was Hel, the ruler of the underworld. From birth, it was clear that she was unlike anyone in Asgard, Midgard, or even Jotunheim. Her appearance was split. One half of her face and body was vibrant, warm, and almost human. The other half was pale, cold, and lifeless, like the stillness of a forgotten grave. She embodied both life and death in a single, strange form, a walking, talking reminder that nothing lasts forever. The gods were uneasy about her. They could handle mischief, monsters, or even a massive world-encircling serpent. But Hel was different. She was silent, patient, and utterly inevitable. She didn't rush. She didn't strike without reason. She simply existed, and that alone was enough to make mortals and gods alike wary. Hel's realm, called Helheim, was a place for those who died not in battle, but of old age or sickness. It was quiet, shadowy, and still, yet it was not empty. Souls moved about, murmuring softly, while Hel watched with calm authority. She was a fair ruler, though her fairness often seemed cold to those who had just arrived. Here, there was no joy, no laughter, but also no injustice, a balanced, eerie kind of peace. Loki's influence shone through Hel. She was cunning, clever, and always a step ahead. She understood the ways of gods and mortals alike, and could predict their actions before they even realized their own plans. Her patience mirrored her father's, and her presence reminded all that chaos is not always loud or violent. Sometimes it is silent, waiting, inevitable. Though feared, Hel was also a part of the natural order, a necessary balance to life and death. She showed that even in the quiet, the cold, and the shadows, there is a role for cleverness, patience, and wisdom, qualities Loki passed down in his own mysterious, unpredictable way. Hel's story is a reminder that not all of Loki's legacy is mischief or disaster. Some of it is quiet, profound, and unavoidable, a reflection of the trickster's depth, the complexity of fate, and the strange, enduring bonds between a father and his children. Loki's life wasn't just about mischief, shapeshifting, or monstrous children. It was also about the tangled web of relationships he wove, intentionally or otherwise. His connections with the gods, giants, and mortals were never simple. They were complicated, messy, and full of contradictions, much like Loki himself. With Odin, Loki was a blood brother. That bond was sacred, unbreakable in theory, yet tested constantly by Loki's unpredictable nature. They shared laughter, strategy, and occasional arguments, but underneath it all was respect and a strange form of affection. Odin tolerated Loki's pranks and schemes, knowing that the trickster's cleverness could sometimes save Asgard in ways brute force never could. With Thor, Loki's relationship was a mixture of annoyance, rivalry, and reluctant camaraderie. Thor, strong and straightforward, often found Loki's antics frustrating beyond words. And yet, Loki sometimes saved Thor from disasters, or from himself, in the most convoluted ways imaginable. Thor never admitted it, of course, but he relied on Loki more than he would ever say aloud. With other gods and goddesses, Loki was a puzzle. Some trusted him cautiously, like Freya, who admired his cleverness but never fully relaxed around him. Others, like the wise and patient Frigg, understood the danger Loki represented and always watched him carefully. Loki could charm, deceive, or inspire fear, sometimes all at once. He was loved, feared, and begrudgingly respected, often in the same conversation. Even with mortals and giants, Loki's relationships were unpredictable. He could be cruel, helpful, mischievous, or cunningly kind. Sometimes he was a friend, sometimes a foe, and sometimes he simply watched, waiting for the perfect moment to tilt the world in his favor. The truth of Loki's relationships is simple. He was chaotic, he was clever, he was unreliable, but he was also a force that bound the 9 realms together in a strange, twisted harmony. Every bond, every conflict, and every act of loyalty or betrayal showed a piece of the trickster's true nature, complex, unpredictable, and endlessly fascinating. For Loki, relationships were never just about connection. They were a game, a puzzle, and a canvas for his mischief, a reflection of the chaos he both loved and embodied. Balder, the beloved god of light and beauty, was the shining jewel of Asgard. His laughter was contagious, his kindness endless, and the gods adored him. The 9 realms seemed brighter wherever he went. But as is often the case in stories involving Loki, perfection attracts mischief and trouble. Balder had a strange gift. He was nearly invulnerable. The gods had made him immune to harm, or so they believed. Every weapon, every arrow, even fire and iron, could not hurt him. The halls of Asgard rang with his laughter, safe in the knowledge that nothing could touch him. But Loki, the trickster, saw opportunity. Where others saw safety, he saw a challenge. Where others saw joy, he saw mischief. And when the gods played a game, tossing harmless weapons at Balder in jest, Loki's mind began to weave a dangerous plan. He learned that mistletoe, the smallest of plants, had not been included in Balder's protections. A tiny, seemingly insignificant thing, perfect for Loki's scheme. Crafting a dart or arrow from mistletoe, Loki handed it to Hotter Balder's blind brother and guided his hand. In one fateful throw, Balder fell, pierced by what seemed like the tiniest threat in the world. The gods were horrified. Screams, tears, and chaos filled Asgard. Thor roared in anger. Odin wept silently, and the halls that once echoed with laughter now rang with grief. Loki, of course, was both careful and clever. He had created the perfect mischief, unavoidable, clever, and irreversible. Balder's death marked a turning point. It was not just a prank gone wrong. It was the spark that would ignite many events leading to Ragnarök. Loki had shown that even the smallest detail could overturn the mightiest of gods. Though cruel, This act revealed the essence of Loki: chaotic, brilliant, and dangerously clever. He reminded the 9 realms that no one, not even a god as perfect as Balder, was truly safe from the unpredictable Trickster. And yet, in the shadows of grief, there was awe at the cunning, relentless mind of Loki, whose chaos would echo through stories and nightmares for ages to come. After the death of Balder, the gods were furious. The halls of Asgard were filled with grief, anger, and whispers of vengeance. Loki, the trickster, had gone too far this time. His cleverness, which had once saved the gods or kept them entertained, now felt like a shadow over their every breath. The gods convened, their faces heavy with sorrow and rage. Even Odin, who had always tolerated Loki's schemes, saw that something had to be done. No amount of charm, cleverness, or apologies could undo what had been done. Balder was gone, and the trickster's role in his death could not be ignored. So they captured Loki. But capturing Loki was no simple task. He was slippery, shapeshifting, clever, always one step ahead. Yet, through cunning, combined strength, and magical bindings, the gods managed to restrain him. His punishment would be as unforgettable as the mischief he had caused. Loki was taken to a remote cave in the mountains, far from Asgard's golden halls, where he was bound with chains that no ordinary magic could break. To ensure his suffering, a serpent was placed above him, dripping venom onto his face. Each drop caused Loki immense pain, but he could not move, could not escape, and could only endure. Yet Loki was not without one small mercy. His loyal wife, Sigyn, stayed by his side. She held a bowl to catch the venom, sparing him from constant agony. But each time she had to empty the bowl, venom would drip onto him, renewing the pain. It was a punishment designed not just to restrain him, but to teach, to remind Loki, and perhaps the world, of the cost of mischief unchecked. In this moment, Loki's life became a paradox. The mighty trickster, the cleverest of the clever, humbled by chains, venom, and the weight of his actions. And yet, even in punishment, the glint of cunning remained in his eyes, a subtle reminder that chaos is never truly gone, only waiting for the next opportunity to emerge. Loki's punishment was both a consequence and a warning. It was the end of one chapter of mischief and the beginning of a slow, inevitable march toward the chaos that would eventually shape Ragnarök. Loki's punishment had begun, but his story was far from over. Bound in a dark cave, high in the mountains, the mighty trickster found himself trapped, yet still very much alive. The chains that held him were not ordinary. They were forged with magic so strong that no shapeshifting, no cleverness, and no charm could ever break them. The cave was silent, save for the occasional drip of venom from the serpent chained above him. Each drop fell with precision, a tiny reminder of his misdeeds, of the chaos he had unleashed upon the gods and the 9 realms. Loki writhed, cursed, and grumbled, yet in his mind he was already planning. Even in chains, the trickster's thoughts never stopped. Loki's wife, Sigyn, remained by his side, loyal and unwavering. She held a bowl to catch the venom, sparing him from constant pain. But each time she had to empty the bowl, venom would fall again, and Loki would scream and twist. Yet he never lost hope. After all, hope and mischief were the two things Loki carried wherever he went. Even bound, Loki observed the world beyond the cave. He listened to the whispers of the mountains, the songs of distant birds, and the faint echoes of Asgard far below. Every sound became part of a plan, every shadow a possible opportunity. The trickster never truly felt defeated. He was patient, enduring, and cunning qualities that would one day serve him well, even in the depths of punishment. Being bound was not just a physical restraint. It was a lesson in patience, consequence, and the slow march of fate. Loki, the mighty mischief maker, was forced to confront the results of his actions, the weight of chaos, and the inevitability of time, yet his spirit remained unbroken. And so, in the dark silence of the cave, with venom dripping and chains holding him fast, Loki waited. He waited patiently, cunningly, and eternally for the day when his role in the Nine Realms story would rise again. Even in his darkest hour, Loki was not alone. Bound in the cave, with venom dripping from the serpent above, he had a companion whose loyalty was unmatched, his wife, Sigyn. While the gods had captured and punished him, Sigyn stayed by his side, a quiet anchor in the storm of Loki's suffering. Sigyn's loyalty was extraordinary. Each time the venom dripped from the serpent above Loki, she held a bowl, carefully catching the poisonous drops before they could touch him. She never faltered, never complained, and never let fear shake her resolve. Her hands ached, her arms tired, but she remained steadfast. Each time she had to empty the bowl, Loki would flinch as venom fell again, and yet Sigyn returned, ever vigilant. Their relationship in this time of suffering was strange, almost magical. Loki, the great trickster, the chaotic mischief maker, could rely on someone completely, utterly loyal. Sigyn did not care for his cleverness, his schemes, or his mischief. She cared only for him. And in return, Loki, even while suffering, felt the warmth of trust and love in a world that often seemed cruel and unfair. This quiet loyalty revealed a different side of Loki, one rarely seen. Behind his cunning and chaos, he had someone who would stand by him through anything. And behind Sigyn's devotion, there was the subtle power of patience and love, a gentle force that even the gods could not command. In the cave, surrounded by darkness, chains, and venom, the trickster and his loyal wife endured together. Loki learned that chaos could be tempered by love, that cunning could be met with steadfastness, and that even in suffering, hope could live quietly in the heart. Sigyn's loyalty was a gentle, enduring light, a reminder that even the trickster god was never completely alone. And as the venom dripped and the hours passed, Loki's mind and spirit quietly planned, waited, and dreamed of the day when his role in the Nine Realms would rise again. Even in his chains, Loki's mind reached far beyond the cave. Tales of Ragnarök, the end of the world, swirled through his thoughts, and he knew that his fate, like that of the gods and all the Nine Realms, was tied to this great prophecy. Ragnarök was not just a battle, it was a reckoning, a time when destinies would clash and the world would be reshaped from fire, chaos, and renewal. The prophecy told of many things: the skies darkened, the seas boiling, and the dead rising from Helheim. Fenrir would break free, Jormungandr would rise from the oceans, and the great serpent and mighty wolf would wreak havoc upon gods and mortals alike. Even Odin, the Allfather, would fall. The stories spoke of fire and frost, of battles so vast that the mountains would crumble and rivers boil, of a world ending and beginning again. Loki understood his place in this prophecy. He was both the cause and the catalyst. His mischief, his cunning, his chaos, all of it had led to this moment. Every prank, every clever escape, every shape-shifting trick had been a step on the path toward the end times. And yet, the prophecy also told of inevitability. The events of Ragnarök could not be stopped. They could be delayed, manipulated, or influenced, but in the end, they would come. Even bound and suffering, Loki's mind raced with possibilities. How could he tilt the outcome in his favor? How could chaos be perfected? How could he rise again, free, and fully play his part when the final battle arrived? The trickster never stopped thinking, planning, imagining. Ragnarök was terrifying, yes, but it was also a stage, a grand stage, for Loki's greatest performance. The prophecy was not just doom, it was opportunity, a chance for the trickster god to shape the world, to play his part in a story far larger than any one god, giant or mortal. As the venom dripped, as the chains held him fast, Loki closed his eyes and envisioned the end of the world. And in that vision, a smile crept across his face. Chaos would come, and he would be at the center of it all. The long-awaited day arrived. Ragnarök, the end of the world, was unfolding, and the skies roared with thunder. The seas churned with fury, and the 9 realms trembled under the weight of fate. Loki, freed from his chains, emerged with cunning in his eyes and chaos in his heart, ready to play his greatest role. Beside him were his children, his legacy of chaos, Fenrir, the giant wolf, powerful and furious, Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, circling the seas with deadly precision, and even Hel, ruler of the underworld, whose shadow stretched across the dead. Together, they formed a force no god could ignore, no mortal could oppose, and no giant could challenge. The battle was fierce. Thor met Jormungandr in a clash that shook the oceans and skies. Fenrir lunged at Odin, teeth bared and eyes blazing. Loki, ever the trickster, wove between friends and foes alike, striking with cunning rather than brute force, turning chaos into strategy. Every mischief, every plan, every clever move he had ever made now became part of a grand design. Yet, even in the heat of battle, there was poetry in the chaos. Loki's laughter echoed above the clash of swords and the roar of beasts. He was not merely fighting, he was orchestrating, manipulating, and reveling in the unpredictability of the world he had shaped. Every moment of terror, every act of courage by the gods, only made the story richer, the drama more intense. In the end, the prophecy unfolded as it must. Friends fell, enemies triumphed, and the world burned and shook. Loki's cunning ensured he survived, at least long enough to witness the full spectacle, to revel in the fulfillment of the chaos he had long embodied. He had played his part perfectly, and the 9 realms would never forget the trickster god who thrived in fire, fury, and fate. Loki's final battle was not just a fight. It was the ultimate performance, the culmination of mischief, cleverness, and chaos. And even as the realms trembled and burned, Loki's eyes sparkled with the thrill of it all, for the trickster god was never truly defeated, only transformed, ready to shape the next story yet to come. Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the chaosbringer, had lived a life full of mischief, cleverness, and consequences, from his mysterious origins to his cunning schemes, from the birth of his extraordinary children to his punishment and eventual rise during Ragnarök. His story was never simple. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and endlessly fascinating, much like Loki himself. Even after the fires of Ragnarök settled, even after the battles had raged and the 9 realms were reshaped, Loki's presence lingered. He was not merely a memory or a shadow. He was a lesson, that cleverness and chaos can coexist, that mischief can have consequences, and that even the most unpredictable beings can leave a mark on the world that echoes forever. Loki's children carried forward his legacy. Fenrir, Jarmungandr, and Hel became symbols of the power of his bloodline, reminders that the world is never completely safe, never entirely orderly. Through them, his influence stretched across realms, shaping destinies in subtle and profound ways. But perhaps Loki's greatest legacy was his reminder to the gods, giants, and mortals alike. Life is unpredictable, sometimes unfair, often strange, but always full of stories waiting to be told. He showed that even in punishment, suffering, and chaos, there is cleverness, resilience, and occasionally a touch of humor. And so, as the 9 realms settled into quiet after the storms, and as the gods rebuilt and the mortals lived on, Loki's story became a tale to be whispered before sleep. A story of trickery, cunning, and the enduring magic of a god who refused to be ignored. So, dear listener, close your eyes. Let the tales of Fenrir, Jarmungandr, Hel, and the Trickster father drift softly through your thoughts. Imagine the golden halls of Asgard, the shadowy depths of Helheim, and the endless waves of the Midgard seas. And remember that every twist, every clever plan, every ripple of chaos has its place in the grand story of the 9 realms. Sleep now, with a mind full of adventures, a heart full of wonder, and dreams as unpredictable as the trickster god himself. Good night.